What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, Panthers Advice. This is probably the biggest game, all right, for the Carolina Panthers in quite some time, because what's crazy to think about is they could be in first place in the NFC South if they win the game today. First place, which sounds crazy because, one, it's not like they're doing bad. It's not like they're under 500, right, and they have a chance to be first. If they win, they should be, over 2 games over 500, if I'm not mistaken. And they have a chance to be first in the NFC South. Now, the NFC South isn't as stacked as some divisions, all right? But the fact that the Panthers are going to be potentially 2 games over 500 with, 5 or 6 weeks left says a lot about where they've came from, right? You look at Dave Canales. You look at what happened last year. We thought we had some momentum, to be honest with you. And then you looked at the start of the season. You're like, oh, boy, here we go again. And at first it was Bryce Young has to go. Then it was Dave Canales has to go. And then I was one of those that says Aviro has to go, right? But the Panthers turned it around in more ways than one. And even the thing with that, when people wanted Bryce Young to go, I understood those people, right? Because Bryce Young was playing inconsistent. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with Bryce Young going, because then it's like you have to bring in another quarterback, and the Panthers eventually going to turn to the Cleveland Browns when it comes to quarterbacks. Who knows what they're going to do with Shador, though, right? But I understood the frustration when people wanted Bryce Young or wanted to move on from Bryce Young, right? I get what they were coming from, because Bryce Young in the first half stunk it up. Second half, he kind of made a comeback, but it just wasn't consistent, right? Then the Dave Canales stuff. Dave Canales, to me, just has so much on his plate. Will he ever give up some of the duties as far as play calling, personnel? We'll see. Or will he ever take more charge on the personnel, right, instead of saying things in the press conference about, the rookie edge rushers? We'll see what happens there. But to me, that kind of halted this team from where they could be, or where I thought they should be, all right, during the season. On top of that, I still think players should play more in the preseason, but Dave Canales seems to have his mind made up that joint practices are potentially better than preseason. But going back to Dave Canales and the reason people wanted him gone, the play calling just wasn't consistent, right? You never know what you're going to get with Dave Canales week to week. So I get why people were frustrated with Dave Canales too, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you move on from Canales. The question isn't then who's going to replace Canales. That's not the question, believe it or not. The question is, who's going to come to Carolina? Who are you going to get to come to Carolina to be under Tepper? Right? That's the main thing. So when certain people wanted Canales gone, it's like, okay, Canales can be gone, but who's going to replace him? Who's going to put up with Tepper? It's the same thing that happened in Dallas, right? Now, with that being said, Tepper, to me, has improved this year a lot, right? He's kind of learned his place, from the outside looking in, right? But if Dave Canales were to hypothetically have been fired or let go, I don't know who the Panthers would have got, right? It's just like free agents right now. Who wants to come to Carolina? It's not at the top of anyone's list right now, to be honest with you. Maybe there's a few guys out there, but it's not at the top. And then for Aviro, this one's interesting, right? We're going to jump into the actual video in a second. But Aviro, I've been off the Aviro train and then on and then off and then on. And right now I'm 1 foot on and I'm 1 foot off, and here's why. All right. You got Princely, you got Scorton, you got DJ Wanham, you got Patrick Jones. You had Clowney last year. All right. Still no pass rush. You got Derek Brown. You got Bobby Brown in the middle. Still no pass rush at all. All right. It's gotten better to a point. And that's why I'm like 1 foot on and 1 foot off when it comes to Aviro, because it's like, is it Aviro's fault or is it just the player's fault, right? It's a tough thing to kind of juggle with right here, because it's like, okay, somebody's got to develop these guys at some point, right? You signed Patrick Jones, you signed DJ Wanham. One of those two, all right, you want to get pressure. Now, that being said, DJ Wanham was starting to hit his stride, and then Patrick Jones he's raw, to be honest with you, right? When you watch his tape, he was definitely more of a hustler. Then you sign 2 rookies. You get Nick Scorton and you get Princely, who's also a raw edge player. So again, with Aviro, it's tough because you look at those 4 edge guys and none of them are dominant pass rushers, right? And so it's like, do you hold that against him? It's kind of tough to do right there. Linebackers, to me, I felt like we needed help there in the draft, but Dave, all right, and potentially Tepper kind of overruled in that area where it's like, no, we're going to take the best player available. They go and get ETN, right? So it's a Vero I just go back and forth on, right? I don't really love his play calling style sometimes because it's like bend, don't break. And I don't always love that depending on the type of situation the Panthers are in. But the Panthers seem to be winning, all right? People have made changes, you know. Vero started playing Nick Scorton more, which we're going to look at in a second, right? But where this all comes from is the fact that the Panthers, right, as much trouble as they were in the beginning with Bryce Young, Vero, the play calling, and everything else, to potentially battling for first place this week against the Niners on Monday Night Football. Pretty crazy, man. With all that being said, let's jump into the actual video right here. So we got a few different things to look at, and then we're going to jump into some film review. So first up, Zach Roberts right here. Analyst reveals totally inaccurate draft news for Carolina Panthers. Let's take a look right here, all right? So according to Bleacher Report's scouting department, the Panthers need to address linebacker, quarterback, and center in the 2026 NFL Draft. Only one of those is an actual need, and it may not even be the most pressing need of all. So we got linebacker, quarterback, center. This one I go back and forth on. Quarterback, I wouldn't hate if they took somebody in like the 5th or 6th round. Linebacker, this is tough because I think Christian Roseman is playing better. I think Trevin Wallace is playing better, right? But then you look at depth, all right? Behind them, you've got Claudin, and then you're kind of hit or miss behind them, right? So linebacker, I think, is something you definitely have to address, right? Just because of injuries in general. On top of that, Roseman played way better, right, when he wasn't playing as many snaps, which could be something we see down the road with other linebackers coming in. It reminds me of something that the Chiefs do a lot with Brett Beach, you know, who's basically transformed the Kansas City Chiefs. He used to be, I won't say laughingstock with the NFL, but they weren't what they are now, right? Where it's 3 or 4 years, they draft somebody, build them up, and then bang, they're gone, right? So that might be the same thing that the Panthers do with Roseboom. Sign him to another 2 or 3 year contract, build somebody behind him, and then bang, he's going to be the new guy, right? So I think linebacker is definitely somebody you need to address early, somebody I thought they should have, you know, kind of gone after in this past draft. And then center, I think we're good there. Potentially, if you want to draft a backup, you know, to each their own, I guess. Let's keep it going. So they do kind of agree with me right here. The Panthers do need linebacker help. Trevin Wallace has been solid at times, but he's not a future star at that position. Roseboom has been serviceable sometimes, but he's not a long-term solution. They've been a decent pairing most of the time, but it's not going to elevate the defense. Here's the thing. All right. Nothing's going to really elevate the defense until we get more of a pass rush in general, right? That's just the truth, right? So you talk about Roseboom, you talk about Trevin Wallace, you got to start with the edge guys first, right? You got to build that up, and then we'll get to the linebackers next. But to me, for them to really be a star, right, we got to get some pass rush first. Goes on to say right here, otherwise this list is totally wrong. The Panthers don't need a quarterback in the 2026 NFL Draft. There aren't a lot of good ones available, and even if the Panthers lose out, they won't pick high enough to get one. I still think 5th or 6th round, you get a backup. I do. If Andy Dalton has fallen off that much from what we saw against the Bills, and we don't see anything from Mike White, we didn't see anything from the guy in Detroit that Dave talked up and then he was released, I don't think it hurts to get a backup right there. They go on right here, list the Panthers' needs, all right, in their order. One's edge rusher. Like I said before, this one's tough because I don't know if edge rusher is number 1. All right, you just took 2 rookies. Let them develop for a little bit. All right, safety, I think, is a big one. I think you know, all right, where that safety should be playing. I think the Panthers can get a pretty good safety. Cornerback, offensive tackle. Cornerback is tough because I think Corey Thornton could be a great number 2. The problem is how Avira runs his system. Another thing I forgot to mention before, right, where I think is that Horn plays the boundary side and then Mike J plays the field side, if I'm not mistaken, or it could be vice versa. One of the things I don't love about his defensive system, all right, and then offensive tackle, something to potentially consider. But I think linebacker has to be in that list somewhere, and I think safety has to be number 1, all right? So kind of my thoughts on that. Next up right here is the Carolina Panthers can take NFC South lead on Monday. Let's jump into this real quick. So the Carolina Panthers can take the NFC South lead with a win on Monday night. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers suffered their 3rd straight loss on Sunday night, opening the door for the Carolina Panthers. The rest of the top 3 teams stayed the same in the playoff race, but the order changed. The Rams moved up with a win, Eagles moved down with a loss, and the Bears stayed third with their win. All right. In the wild card race, the Seahawks, Green Bay Packers both won. The Niners need to win Monday night to keep their spot. Otherwise, the Detroit Lions move up. Now, that being said, waiting on the outskirts of the wild card pictures of the Panthers, so a win would help them in a lot of ways. With the second straight week of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers losing, the Panthers and the Buccaneers are tied above the NFC South for now. Tampa Bay is undefeated in the division while Carolina has one loss, so the Bucs stay in first place. A win by Carolina on Monday night, and they move into the top spot. So how big is this game? All right, it would put the Panthers as the number 1 seed in the NFC South. Now, how much bigger does it get? It gets pretty big right here because this is from a Tampa Bay headline. This wasn't me writing optimistic news regarding Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield's hurt. All right. Adam Schefter said pre-MRI, the Buccaneers believe Mayfield suffered a sprained AC joint in his left shoulder, and they're not ruling him out for Sunday's game versus the Cardinals, but today's MRI will show more. All right. I'm looking right now. No update on Baker Mayfield. All right. Here's a Buccaneer schedule. I think the Bucs, man, I think you have to try and bench him against Arizona and New Orleans, give him a break, which is huge for the Carolina Panthers, right? Because the Panthers play them week 16 and week 18. If Baker's banged up and they don't give him a break, I would like to think Avero's going to tee off. I would like to think that, but I don't know for sure. Let's keep this thing going right here. Next up, man, I want to talk about Nick Scorton right here. Nick Scorton, to me, is why the Panthers don't need an edge rusher quite yet, right? Because Nick Scorton has developed so much from when he first started getting playing time, like actual playing time, week 3, week 4, not just a little random possessions that Avera was putting him in. He's developed so much, and I think Princely has so much potential too that you can't go out and you can't get an edge rusher quite yet, right? If you want to get one, maybe in the 4th or 5th round, right? Somebody's on your board, then grab them, all right? But Scorton, to me, he has potential to be that guy, right? And so you could be like, okay, well, that's just Scorton, not Princely. If you can get somebody like Scorton to be that guy where teams are forced to slide right or left, depending on where Scorton lines up, right? Forcing a tight end to chip him, a running back to chip him, that's eventually going to open up something else. Like right here, let's take a look. Look who's getting double teamed right here. It's not Scorton, but look, Scorton's going to get chipped right here. So Scorton's getting chipped right here. Derek Brown's getting double teamed right here. But we just need more consistency across the board, right? So when we talk about edge rushers, I'm telling you, Scorton, man, give him another year, and I think he'll be that guy, all right? So I'm excited for tonight's game against the Niners, Monday Night Football. Let me know your thoughts, all right? We're going to go live potentially after the game, depending on how late it runs, all right? But we'll definitely have a video out for sure, so stay tuned for that. Panthers Advice is out. Catch you on the next one. Take it easy. Peace.